Hey, welcome to Taylor's Trick Taking Table. I'm Taylor, or at least I thought I was. I am suffering so much from the Mandela effect right now. If you don't know what that is, it's where things in your past that you thought were true, just I guess aren't true anymore. Like, I thought it was Bush's baked beans, right? But I guess it's actually Welch's baked beans, or Oreos. I thought they were chocolate cookies and thick, even double stuffed. But I guess they're thin and golden now? Okay. And I could have sworn on the channel we covered a game called Jekyll versus Hyde. But for some reason, we're covering a game called Jekyll and Hyde versus Scotland Yard by Olivier Siperi and Giono. What? That doesn't make any sense. And I used to think instead of a gorgeous production of 12 Chip Trick by Root, it used to be just 12 crokinole pieces in a bag. I feel like I'm kind of going a little bit insane. But thankfully I found this super helpful thing that helps me go beyond insanity, so I won't have to worry about this anymore. I think this is really my only solution left. Oh! 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 Hey! Hi! I'm back! I'm Hyde. Taylor. Or I guess Taylor Hyde. Or Tide, I guess? But I wasn't wrong. It was just a different version of me. There was a game called 12 Chip Trick with crokinole pieces that were 1 through 12. And just like that hook, these are the same game. It's a trick-taking game with 12 cards. Insane how much game there is on this. I guess that's the hook. We'll go to the table and I'll teach you how to play fully if you haven't seen the old video. But then also, I was right. It was Jekyll versus Hyde. This is a similar game. In fact, Giono and Fitzgerald are back again. This was a competitive 2v2 game where the hook was one player is Jekyll and one player is Hyde, and they're trying to either balance tricks or make one player take a bunch and one player take none. But in this one, players are they're cooperatively trying to get away from Scotland Yard. There's kind of a board of sorts, and the premise, kind of hook of the gameplay, is that players want to have each other kind of balanced in the tricks, and also they're playing against a kind of dummy hand called the city, which will flip over a card randomly, and you have to kind of react to that. There's also a hierarchical trump and a story campaign where you can learn the game and play different chapters. Oh, it's wild. So let's go to the table and I'll teach you how to play. The absolutely gorgeous deck of Jekyll and Hyde versus Scotland Yard is made up of 1 to 8 in 3 suits, and then 4 potion cards of 3 to 6. Here we have a game of Jekyll and Hyde versus Scotland Yard. So we have it kind of set up. The interesting thing about this game is it actually is played in a campaign of sorts, where you play through chapter 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and it has gorgeous art and a fun story as you discover it as you go. So I'm going to teach you how to play the very first chapter, and then I'll show you a little bit more of the future chapters, but I don't want to spoil too much. So if you don't want anything spoiled, you can definitely just watch the first chapter, because that's what you will experience. But I'll put up in the corner some annotations for when it turns into chapter 2, 3, and 4 rules. Chapter 4 is the base game. So they say in the rulebook that 1, 2, 3, and 4 kind of introduce you to the standard game, and then 5 all the way down to 10 are the differences, kind of tweaks in difficulty or fun little challenges that they teach you how to play. So I am just going to show you chapter 1 here. So to set up chapter 1, you don't need this Scotland Yard pawn. I'll bring it in when I show off one of the future chapters. Also, my Jekyll and Hyde pawn sadly broke in transit, and so it does not connect to its thing. But that actually kind of works for this playthrough, because I can just put that player, or the player piece, right there. So that represents the 2 players. So again, one player is going to be Mr. Hyde, and one player is going to be Dr. Jekyll. So in the first scenario, you would read the story
So I can read the story. The full moon was shining and a thick fog was covering the city of London. Dr. Jekyll was in a hurry to get home. He had been maintaining balance with his evil double for several weeks. The new formulas seemed to work, but the effects were already starting to wear off. Then, after you read that, there is kind of a chapter description on how to play. And then after you beat that, so you achieved the success, you'd flip it. You'd have a new set of story with another wonderful vintage trait art, a new chapter. You would beat that, flip that, chapter 3, right? So that's kind of the flow of it all. So looking at chapter 1 here, I'm just going to summarize what's on this card here, but I'll hold it here so you can read it if you want. But essentially it says you want to move the Jekyll and Hyde pawn to the last space after the 2 rounds. You always play 2 rounds. Right now, there's some symbols on the cards that we're going to ignore, and the player, this is huge, that wins the least tricks moves the pawn the same number of steps in tricks that they win. And if you ever go beyond the last position, both players fail immediately and the chapter ends. Down here, it is kind of a track of sorts, and this is where we want the pawn to land. Again, in the first few chapters, if you go past this, you lose immediately. It says up in the top right where you start the pawn, so it says the 4th step. So we're going to move there, and then we're kind of set up for just this very first intro chapter. So again, the goal is to move this pawn to here. How it moves is after you play rounds of tricks, the player who took the fewest tricks between the 2 players, and again, this is a cooperative game. I don't know if I said that. The player that took the fewest between the 2 players is going to move the number of tricks they won forward. So say, for example, Hyde won 3, Jekyll won 6, or whatever. They would move the pawn 3 spaces. How do you play the trick taking? Well, each player gets dealt 12 cards of the deck. The deck is 28, and 4 of them are cut, so 4 are just out of the round. Each player, without talking, is going to look at their hand, and they have to pass what is known as Scotland Yard or the city, 4 cards each. There are rules in the game where if you get 8s, you have to pass them to the city. So these 3 would definitely be the 3 that Dr. Jekyll would be passing, and then they could pass any other one they want. It is usually a good strategy to give them bad cards. So let's just say they gave them the 2. So Mr. Hyde is going to do the same thing. Maybe they look through their hand, they give them, some weak cards. So 4 kind of weak cards. So then when that city deck is built, you're just going to shuffle it. And so now you're going to play 8 tricks with 2 cooperative players, Mr. Hyde and Dr. Jekyll, and then kind of an AI player up here as the city. This pawn down here that I just realized I hadn't explained is a leading character pawn. It's kind of not too important in the first chapter, so we'll kind of ignore that now. In the start of every round, the city will lead to the first trick. So they're going to flip over a card. So this is going to be the lead suit to the trick. This is red, or the foxes. An important part of the game is whenever a suit gets played for the first time, you move its corresponding suit marker onto this kind of hierarchy track. This is what is the weakest suit, then second weakest, then second strongest, I guess, suit, and then the strongest suit. We had just found out that the fox suit is going to be the weakest right now for the round. So coming to Dr. Jekyll, it is still a must-follow game. Maybe they play the 5, and then coming to Mr. Hyde player here, they see that their partner's already winning it, so they're just going to play the 4. So Dr. Jekyll is going to take this trick, and then they are going to lead to the next trick. An important part of the game is, so after they took that trick, they can choose the strength hierarchy. So they're looking at their hand, they have more black than blue, so maybe they actually play a blue because they want black to be the strongest suit. So you immediately set this hierarchy here. It is still a must-follow game, however, so Mr. Hyde is going to play a blue if they have one. And then what's interesting is the deck always just flips randomly in plays. So in this situation, they won because black is higher than blue. If this was even a black 1 or 2 or whatever, it would still win because the suit black is stronger than the suit's blue right now. So the city is going to take this trick. They'll collect it off next to their city pile, and then they are going to lead to the next trick. Again, it is must follow here. It's interesting because the city has a really strong hand because they get all the 8s at the start. As you can see here though, if a player can't follow suit, like Mr. Hyde here, they can play whatever they want. So they could play this 2, which would win it because 2 is stronger than blue. They could also play one of these potions. What the potions do is they have 3 different effects which correspond to the suit that you play the potion on. It causes like a chemical reaction, and the reaction, like what happens, depends on the suit you play it on. So if Mr. Hyde would have played the 3 here, they would have triggered the spider reaction, and as you can see from the spider token, it has a swap, if it will focus, it has a swap of the 3 discs here. So if Mr. Hyde had played it there, they would have triggered the most recent suit, which was blue, and that means you have to move at least 2 of the discs. These are forced, even if it isn't beneficial to the players. So if Mr. Hyde would have done that, obviously the right play would have been to play the 2 so they could win a trick. But if they decided to do that, this is going to be a 3 in that suit. So this up here would still win it. But maybe Mr. Hyde is like, oof, I don't have many blue. I'm going to move blue down so they can do that. Again, these are all blue, so that wouldn't really change this trick, but maybe that is some strategy that they're going for. So as you can see, the city deck won, and they're going to take another trick and lead to the next trick. In this next trick, as you can see, Dr. Jekyll is short-suited, so maybe they're going to play a red, which is now, because of that swap, stronger than the blue. And this is maybe what Mr. Hyde had all along planned, because when they play this 6, again, the potion triggers on the most recent color here. So this is going to trigger the red. And as you can see from the red, I don't know if the symbology is going to make sense. I'll have to explain it. But it is kind of this taking of a trick action. So when that's played, one of the players, and you can discuss this, is going to take one of the tricks from the city. So maybe Mr. Hyde takes it. And then over here, this is going to be a 6 red, or 6 plus red, which is still lower than a 7. So Dr. Jekyll is going to take this trick. And the last thing to explain is this bird 1. So maybe through like this lead here where Dr. Jekyll led that, and if it's a lead potion, the player can play whatever they want, so maybe they play the 2. This also triggers a reaction where it's potion and then a suit. And this one is the player who triggers it can look at the top card of the city deck, put it into their hand, and put any card they want back. They see that it was actually pretty bad, so they're just going to put it right back. And then it's going to do the trick as usual. So that is a 4 black, that is a 2 black, this is a 1 red, as you can see. The 4 black is going to win. So that's kind of the flow of the trick-taking play. There are some interesting interactions if someone goes potion, 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 or maybe potion, suit, potion, or potion, potion, suit, which I can explain now. Here we have in the rulebook kind of an edge case for all of them, which is super helpful. So let's say it was lead blue 4, then red 3. The potion that was played after all those would trigger on that red 3 there. If it was blue 4 and then potion 5, the potion would trigger on the blue, and then the red wouldn't trigger anything. If it goes potion, potion 4, as you can see here, triggering the effect of fear when the fear 4 is played, because the potion 3 doesn't get any trigger effect, the potion 4 would. If you have more than one potion in a trick, there's only one effect that gets triggered in a trick. So as you can see here, fear, then potion would trigger an effect, but the 4th potion doesn't trigger any effect, as it does not belong to a reaction. If it's potion, 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 there's no trigger effect in the 5 wins. As you can see down here, they have an example of potion, then red, it triggers the effect where you try to resolve taking the trick from the city, and then the 5. So it says the 5 doesn't trigger a reaction because the 3 and the 5 already triggered a reaction. I hope that was clear and made sense. As a side note, if the reactions can't happen, like if it says take a trick and the city doesn't have a trick yet, you just ignore it, or if it says exchange with a card and the city doesn't have a card, you just ignore it. Fast forwarding to the end of the round, as you can see, Mr. Hyde took 2, the city took 2, and then Jekyll took 4. So you find out who was the lowest. It's Mr. Hyde over here with 2 tricks, and you move the pawn that many spaces, so 1, 2. So now players know they have to take 1, 2, 3 in the next round. After moving the pawn, players are going to play another round by just collecting all the cards, shuffling it, redealing, doing that same flow where they have 4 cut, they give 4 each to the city, they shuffle the city deck, the city leads, kind of that whole thing. This does get reset by the chapters, so you'll just move that off. And then their next goal in that second round is to get this pawn here. So they need the lowest player to take 3 tricks. If it looked like this, maybe at the end of that round, where Hyde and Jekyll got 3 each, they would, both be the lowest player, so that would win, because it would move it 3 spots. Again, if they went too wild and maybe got 4 each, that would have moved the pawn off and they would have lost. So that's how to play the very first chapter. If you don't want any spoilers, skip to Final Thoughts now if you want. I'm going to put something up here now to start explaining the second chapter. So how the second chapter works is you now have to worry about the 8s in the decks. So the 8s in the deck that you give to the city at the start, what they do is if you win an 8 in your tricks, you will move the pawn an additional step forward, which might seem a little scary, but it's actually super important and needed because the pawn now starts on the first spot. So all the way over here. So as you can do some math, you only have 2 rounds and there's only 8 tricks. So even if you do the best where it's 4 and 4, you would only go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's by perfectly splitting the tricks. So as you can tell, you kind of might want to win some of these 8s. And they start in the city deck, always. So as you can tell, there's some kind of manipulation, maybe stealing some tricks, maybe moving some things around with the black kind of bird power. That is how the second round, or second chapter rather, works. On the bottom of each of these chapters, there's also like achievements, if you can see here, where it says like Jekyll or Hyde wins a trick by playing an 8 from their hand. So I think that's kind of hinting like you need to learn how to use the bird ability. So you can also shoot for those achievements when you play. For chapter 3, we actually get to start using the Scotland Yard pawn. Ooh. For chapter 3, what happens now is you also worry about the 1s, 2s, and 3s. So on the 1s, 2s, and 3s in each suit, there's this Scotland Yard hat, cop hat, bobby hat, I don't know. But it's on the 1s, 2s, and 3s of all the cards. And you're going to look into the trick pile of the leading character. So the leading character is whoever is over on the spot. So now this matters, where it'll start as someone and then in the next round, it'll start as someone else. You will look into that player's trick pile. So maybe we're looking through Mr. Hyde's trick pile. You're going to count how many 1s, 2s, and 3s are in there. So 1, 2, 3. So there's 3 of them. And you're going to move the Scotland Yard pawn forward that many spaces. If the Scotland Yard pawn ever captures or is on the same space or even past the Jekyll and Hyde pawn, the players lose. The order, however, is again, you see who took the fewest, so maybe it was Hyde, they took 2, you move that many spaces, then you would see the 8s in the both players' tricks and move it that many spaces, so maybe they took 2 8s, and then you would count up and move the bobby that many spaces, so 1, 2, 3. So it's kind of chasing the players as they try to hurry and get to here at the end of the round. What is very interesting to note, however, is once the players get to here, if they go past it, they don't lose immediately, but for every amount they go past it, they move the Scotland Yard pawn toward them. So this is actually the timer of the game where it is slowly going to capture them at the end of the track. That is chapter 3, and chapter 4 is just the same idea there, except now you look at both players' tricks for the 1s, 2s, and 3s. So that's how to play the standard game. Again, 1 through 4 is the standard game. I'm going to show you some things, so this is definitely more major spoiler for 5 through 10. For example, it says like the leading character must win the last trick. And then also at the end of the night card, it moves immediately forward if the player does not win the last trick. So there's some more interesting things. Sometimes the 3s are worth more, or, some super fun special surprises that I'm not going to reveal. Also, amazing Vincent Dutrait art. So that is essentially how to play Jekyll and Hyde versus Scotland Yard. The deck in 12-chip trick is, you guessed it, 12 chips numbered 1 through 12. The top 3 and the bottom 3 are blue, and the middle ones are red, which is important for the gameplay. If you're playing with 2 or 3 players, you'll use all 12 chips. If you're playing with 4 players, you pull out under this hidden secret compartment at the bottom of the box here, 4 more chips. I'm first going to teach how to play at 3 players, then 2 players, then 4 players. So at 3 players, you're going to use all 12 chips. You're going to wash them in the center here to kind of shuffle them, and then each player is going to get 2 blue and 2 red each. They can look at the chips that they get. 12-chip trick is a may-follow game, so starting with the person who leads to the trick first, maybe let's say it's this pig in boots, they are going to play any chip they want into the center, so they have a 12, a 2, a 4, and a 9. So let's say they play this 4. So when it comes to the black 3 player, they are going to play whatever they want into the trick. So why they would want to play something might make sense later, but for now, let's just say everyone plays like that. The person who plays the highest in the trick is going to win the trick, and they are going to take one of these discs and score it. If there is a red or multiple reds, or if they're all red, they have to take a red first before they take any of these. So if there's just one red, they have to take it. So this red, I probably shouldn't use the old 12 trip trick pieces to teach the game, but hey, this red 5, it is going to win the trick because they played the 11. They are going to have to take this 4, so they're going to take it and they're going to score it. So that goes face up in front of them. Now, going clockwise from the winning player, the rest of the players are going to also draft a chip, but this is going to go into their hand and not into a face-up kind of score pile. So when it comes to the pig, maybe they take the 11, it goes into their hand, and then down here, this old black crokinole piece is going to take the 1. So now these 2 players have 4 chips in their hand again, but the player up here only has 3, and they have the 4 over here as face-up scoring. So now they're going to lead to the next trick. Let's show a different example of how the trick can go. So let's say it goes like this. So now the pig and the boots played the highest number. They're going to draft first. And again, you have to draft a red if it's there. So since there's 2, they actually get a choice. So say they take the 8. It goes face up in front of them. So then again, it goes clockwise, where the next player has to draft a chip. If there's red, they have to take it. But again, since they lost, this doesn't go face up into their score pile, it goes into their hand. But they have to take this 9 red. And then this last one here, they have to take it into their hand. So then the pig in red boots would then lead to the next trick. And so this is going to keep happening over and over and over until one player has 4 face up in front of them. Then the round is going to end immediately. So let's jump ahead to the end of the round, and it looks like the pig took their last chip. They won their last 4th trick, and all of their chips are face up, and so they have none in their hand, so this triggers the end of the round. Players are now going to add from their hand to their face up scoring pile. If a player doesn't have anything, it's just all their 4 chips are going to be added to their hand. And now players are going to count the number on the face value of the chips that they have, the 4 that they have, and they're going to see if they bursted or not. The number that makes a player's burst is if they exceed 21. So sadly, if you do all the math here, it looks like every single player here went over 21. If that does happen, it's the player with the highest number. So it'd be this player over here with a 33. Let's say, however, maybe this got moved around, so instead of the red crokinole piece taking the 10, they maybe took a 6. So then they actually only got 18, then they actually would win. And so the player who wins is going to take one of these coasters. That is 1 point to winning the whole game. Once a player gets 3 of those coasters, they win. So again, if you burst, you are out. But if players who don't burst sum and tie, then actually both players would get a coaster. So say, for example, they got 18 and they got 18 through some math, they would both get 1. And if somehow both players get 3 at the same time, then shared victory. Hey, if you skipped ahead because you already knew how to play 12 chip trick, this is the scoring difference. So what you do is you actually see if anyone went over that bust limit of 21. If they do, they're out. And if not, it's whoever scored the highest before busting at 21. If everyone busts, it's just the highest number. And what happens is this is actually match scoring. You don't keep total of the scores and you move it over from round to round to round and play 3 rounds. In this one, you actually see who did the best and they get a coaster, and that's like a match point, and it's first to 3 coasters. How to play at 2 players is a somewhat similar setup. You still wash the chips. Each player takes 2 blue and 2 red, except now there's going to be a dummy player, and they are going to put their 4 chips in a stack like this. How it works is, let's say the red player played this and the black crokinole piece played that. When it comes to the AI player, they always just flip the top card from their stack there. That's how they play into the trick. And then when it comes to them drafting, so let's say the black crokinole player, they won, so they're going to have to take this 8 and score this 8. So when it comes to the stack here, they always take the lowest of what they can pick, and it just goes to the bottom of their stack. Unless, of course, they scored it, then it would go over in their score pile. But that is pretty much how they play. So in another example here, let's say they won it with a 9. They would take the 7, right? And just a setup note, that stack that they make is random. It's not like it's like a blue, red, or whatever, or 2 blue, 2 red. It's always random in the setup. The game ends the same way, where the players are trying to get match points with these coasters here. And if the AI player is actually the one to take 3 coasters, the player among the actual remaining players with the more coasters is the winner. So like, for example, if the AI gets 3 and it looked like this, where it was 2-1, the black crokinole player would win. If tied, somehow the AI actually wins. Woo! And if you're playing with 4 players, you are going to add the 4 chips that I showed at the bottom of the game box, which are 2 reds, 2 blues, and those are the values. And that's how to play 12 chip trick and 16 chip trick. So that is Jekyll and Hyde versus Scotland Yard and 12 chip trick. Ugh, mouthful. Let's talk about 12 chip trick first. But again, these were copies given to me by Mondu Games. So take everything I say with a grain of salt for sure. That said, I think it's a little self-evident how amazing this production is. Love a little flap for trying to get the games out. And this looks so cool. It's like a linen finish. Amazing, amazing art. I think it has come so far from just the crokinole pieces with stickers on them. And the game is just so gorgeous. And it feels like, I know it's kind of the theme, right, of sitting at a bar and playing. But when you're playing with these coasters and these chips in your hand that are easier to hold, I think, than the crokinole pieces, it just feels like you're hanging out at the pub. It feels so wonderful. And the fact that they put, you know, effort and care into making this go from 3 players to now 2 to 4, and adding more chips even to make it 16 chip trick to allow for 4 players is great. And, you know, similar thoughts to what I had to the game from when I played it back in the day. I do think, you know, the gameplay is very similar, and I definitely enjoy it. I like the match scoring here. I think it's a good call. And again, I don't know if that was a mistranslation or not. I don't know if it was always match scoring, because in here it says TGM 2022 no burst variant scoring, but it just says there's no burst, you just round half down, but there's still match scoring, if that makes sense. You still would win, you know, best 3 out of whatever, best first to 3. So I don't know if you weren't supposed to keep track between this rounds and only play 3 rounds. Maybe we had that translation wrong, but I do like the match scoring, just because in this game where it's quick and, you know, those numbers can get big, you can kind of try to like go for it or not. I think there's something that's fun with match scoring that lets you kind of just like go for it. I do think that since there's no kind of rounded down, unless you play with the variant, that going for that whole, you know, 9, 10, 11, 12 strategy being gone is tough, because that was really fun to watch and see happen. So I think I'd probably always play with the rounded down flow. But I do think the match helps, though. It lets players kind of go wacky, and I feel this is kind of like a pub game, so it works. It's interesting, actually, covering both 12 chip trick and Jekyll and Hyde versus Scotland Yard, which, oh my gosh, I don't know why I combined these 2 games into one video. They're both mouthfuls to say. But playing both of them at 2, which I got a chance to do, which was great, you use kind of the same system where there's a deck, an AI deck that you flip randomly every time. It was funny because I showed someone their first trick-taking game was these 2 back-to-back. And they're like, is this normal for trick-takers to have like a third AI player? I was like, no, it's not. I'm so sorry for showing you 2 back-to-back, which are very different. And I do think it works, though. I think I genuinely would prefer 12 chip trick at 3/2 just because I like that human interaction. But if I did have 2 players and I want to play this, it definitely still works. You can bank off of what the AI does, because it always takes lowest. And in a game where counting cards is huge, it's nice to have cards cut or chips cut until you get to a certain point where they start taking the lowest and it goes underneath, and then you're like, oh, I know exactly what they have, because you can see the color, right? So you can see what they're about to play when the chips are like stacked like this, right? If they have, you know, a blue or a red on top, you can guess what is going to come out for them. So it's another cool, fun element. It kind of reminds me of like You Chronicle or something at 2, where you can kind of bank off what's coming out and really just card count in a different way at 2. So it was fun at 2. Yeah, no, I definitely liked it. At 4, it again just felt kind of like the same 3-player vibe. So I love that they paid attention to player counts and they made a game that was just for 3 definitely work at 2 or through 4. So that's awesome. And the production, absolutely amazing. So this, wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Check this out. Amazing production. And I think it's at SN, maybe on their sites, but 12-chip chick, absolutely stellar. Jekyll and Hyde versus Scotland Yard is also absolutely amazing. I don't know if I've ever done back-to-back games that were just this gorgeous. I think Vintage Trait, one of my favorite artists, and the amount of artwork in here is just absolutely stellar. From the chapter cards, which it seems like each one of them, you know, kind of a one-use chapter, is just absolutely gorgeous, to the detail in the board. You know, like the spilled tea stain, or like the fact that the track is kind of like circled, like it's like pen or something. Just absolutely gorgeous. The production is really good. The only con, and I think you kind of saw it in the setup, is my Dr. Jekyll and Hyde pawn snapped. I'll just get glue for that bad boy. I think it's tough because the original one, Jekyll versus Hyde, came with this like metal bust. This really cool metal bust. And that doesn't bust because it's metal. And sadly, these ones, especially because like the access point is so small, you know, on a wooden thing, they're definitely prone to breaking, especially because the other one's also like on a foot. They're on the chase. It did come wrapped in bubble wrap, and this, like inside the box, it came wrapped in bubble wrap and this like protective case for the 2 pawns. So I feel like they did as much as they could, but that could happen. I don't know how else to avoid that. Other than that, though, amazing production. I don't like spiders, so rough suit choice there, Jekyll and Hyde and Mandu and whoever did the suit choice. Other than that production, that I think is absolutely stellar, the gameplay. The gameplay. First off, I love games like The Crew, or like ones with campaigns, where they teach you how to play the game as you go. And this one has a very attainable amount of plays. So it only has 10 chapters. And the first few, they're not too easy, but you should be able to, you know, get through them and get to that 4th game pretty easily. But what was interesting was the first 2 chapters, they're very interesting because just reading the rules, it's like, oh, you have to give the 8s to the city deck, and you're like, okay. And then you're wondering, oh, is there nuance to what I would give the city? And there definitely is. I think you want to short suit yourself. I think you want to give them suits and then remember what suits you gave them because you want to make them weak. There's some really cool movements. But I was wondering, like, oh, do I give them like high numbers? Not at the start. You definitely just want to take tricks. And it's pretty evident when you realize, like, oh, even if they split the tricks evenly, we have to start winning some 8s too to really get that Jekyll and Hyde pawn all the way to the end point. I do love the first 2 rounds, though. The first 2 chapters where you have to get exactly on that spot are really fun. And in fact, when you go to like chapter 3 and 4, where you can actually like move past that spot, and all it does is move the pawn. Not that it lost tension, because I think that is the game, is like making sure the pawn doesn't catch you. But there was like something fun where I'm like, you know, I would play these first 2 chapters again, even though I do like 3 and 4. The 1 and 2 were slick. I actually really like this like simple, like hit a specific spot type game. It was really fun. I showed this to someone as their very first trick-taking game. It landed really well. I don't think there's too much overhead. I think a cooperative trick-taking game really helps when you show someone their first trick-taking game, because you can be like, hey, this is like kind of what I'm going to do, or like, this is what I'm thinking. Or like, when you lead a suit, you're like, you now have to play this suit. And you can kind of talk through a lot of the tricks. It's helpful that at the end you can just be like, this is what I was thinking, this was my hand, you know, and kind of share insight. So I thought this was an absolutely stellar production and gameplay flow. The campaign, it was interesting because the person I showed this to, they were like, I didn't know how I would feel about the story in a trick-taking game, but you know, 3 or 4 chapters in, they were like, what's gonna happen? You know, they're just small paragraphs, but it's like, what's happening? It's written really well. I think it's really fun. The artwork, obviously, does a stupendous job of bringing you into the world of this kind of chase of sorts. And I thought, I mean, I'm not going to go into too much detail because of spoilers, but wait a second. Oh no, I can feel him coming back. Oh no, I'm going to talk about spoilers. Okay, spoiler alert. He's coming back. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Ah!
That's right. Mr. Hyde back to talk about the spoilers. So, huge spoilers for the future missions. But the future missions are super slick. Not only do they have these, 1, 2, 3 kind of achievement systems, which I think in a solo or cooperative kind of game where you have different ways to play, you can either just go through the chapters, right, and try to beat the harder chapters all the way through 10, or you could try to really beat them with the achievements. It kind of gives players what they want, like if they want like a scoring kind of achievement system, or if they just want to be kind of completionists, go through the chapter and feel like that was enough for them. I love this system also because then you can go back and replay a chapter that you really like, because they all are so different. Like this one says, the leading character must win the last trick, and if they don't, it moves the Scotland Yard pawn 1 step forward immediately, which is important, because if you're 1 ahead of the Scotland Yard at the end of the round, and before you do all this scoring, like moving your pawn forward, it'll move immediately forward once. You could lose early, which is wild. Another one here, where you have to give one of your potions to the city if you have one, which is huge, because you're already given the 8s. So you're given the 8s, and then a potion. So it's kind of like you have no control in the day phase, where you are giving the city kind of bad cards, and also knowing what you're giving them, and trying to make sure they're in suit, more in a suit that they don't have, or that you're going to make weak, rather. So, as you can see, like they just slowly get harder and harder and harder, especially because the potions, your main way to control things, right? You can move the pawns around, you can take a trick from the city, and when they have the potions, it kind of is tough, because it starts to get closer to where, in the rulebook they say, sometimes you have to take the actions of the potions, like if they react, even if it doesn't help you. And so when the city has potions and they come out randomly, that starts to get closer to where, like, sometimes I've just had it to where, like, yeah, that didn't really help us when it triggered. And yeah, so sometimes it's where if you win the 3, it actually counts as moving 2 forward. So then it's kind of like a bomb of sorts that you really want the city to at least take like a 3 trick, maybe. And then sometimes you're combining them. Sometimes oh man, I don't want to spoil the last 2, but it gets hard and challenging, but also different, which I think is a hallmark of a really cool system. Like taking the base idea of this game, and I think what's funny is that's already kind of what they did with Jekyll versus Hyde, where they took a kind of a base idea of balancing tricks, and then also sometimes having one player get a bunch, sometimes having one player get a few. Taking that core system, making it cooperative, but then also making twists on this cooperative game in different ways, harder ways, to where I think it's pretty much going to satisfy everyone. If you're an intro trick-taking fan, this is huge, because you can walk your way into learning how the game flows and just different trick-taking things. And then if you're experienced, you can, pretty quickly get to chapters 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 that are hard, different, fun, wacky, interesting. So I think this is sensational. I think this gets the seal. Yeah, so again though, they sent me this game, so take that with a grain of salt. It's a salty seal. But that was 12-chip trick and Jekyll and Hyde versus Scotland Yard. Thanks so much for watching, and have a good day. Bye!